Welcome again to Palm Beach Atlantic University and the LeMieux Center for Public Policy. We have another phenomenal leader here with us today to share his insights about business and government, and that's former United States Secretary of the Department of Commerce and financier, investment banker, world-renowned financial pro, Secretary Wilbur Ross. Mr. Ross, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a real honor. I've just been reading your book.
Oh, good.
And I feel very inadequate in life reading about all of your accomplishments. But I wanted to start off just to have you describe a little bit about what the Department of Commerce does. I don't think many people know. They may know that you might help with business deals for businesses around the world, but there were, I think you said, 40,000 employees and a lot of different functions. Tell our folks a little bit about what the Department of Commerce does.
The Department of Commerce is the major conglomerate within the government. In addition to trade and tariff activities, it operates a whole bunch of very different businesses. One is the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Economic Advisors, the National Institute of Science and Technology, NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, National Weather Service, 16 space satellites. It goes on and on and on. And that's one of the things that challenged me and made me want to do it, because it's such a complicated creature. And it was about to get more complicated because the census is only taken once every 10 years. That meant in 2020, the next year, end of my term, we had to hire 400,000 part-time workers to get them to go out and knock on doors. Got even more complicated because you do it as of April 1st. What else happened April 1st? COVID. So now we had to get personal protective equipment for 400,000 people, get it to them, convince them they'd be safe, and get on with the census. So that was quite a chore.
I don't think there's any other department in the federal government that has so many disparate roles and responsibilities as the Department of Commerce.
No, there isn't. There isn't.
So you had, all of your experience had been in the business world. I think I read you had done business, private equity investment banking for 55 years.
Right.
And been very successful, world renowned for your acumen. But here you are coming into the government, which is a very different animal than the private sector. It doesn't have the incentives of profit. So how did you manage the people in the Department of Commerce to achieve your goals?
Well, several things. In private sector, money is the ultimate reward. It's the ultimate currency you use to motivate people. In government, nobody really makes any money. So the motivational tools are titles. And you must be very careful to get the person's title correct, because that's what he lives on or she lives on. So have woe behold you if you get wrong the assistant to the deputy to the undersecretary's title, because that's like a body blow for them. But the department being so complicated, I put in a fairly early reform the very first day that I was there. I explained to each of these section heads that we needed a weekly report from them, just a brief thing, 1.5, 2 pages at the most. What did they do last week? What were they hoping to do next week? And what were their longer term aspirations and challenges? That was greeted with a lack of enthusiasm. But after a few minutes of utter silence, one of the senior staffers got up and said, "Well, Mr. Secretary, it hasn't been our practice to do that." I said, "Well, it is now, starting this weekend." So that weekend, they all put them in on Friday. I spent the whole weekend marking them up. So when they got to their desk on Monday, there was my markup of their write-up. So the water cooler discussions were all, oh my God, guy not only wants us to make a report, he actually reads it and will comment on it. So we started instilling a little bit of a private sector sense of discipline.
When I read about this weekly, weekly report in your book, it reminded me of what Elon Musk did just recently with the Doge organization, asking for a weekly, what are the 5 things you did this week?
Right.
So you had brought that accountability to the Department of Commerce well prior to that.
Right. Now, my point wasn't so much firing people. My point was simply the only way to know what so many disparate people are doing. We have 200 offices in the U.S., 72 offices overseas. It's a hard creature to get your arms around. So you need constant communication with them. And then I did a lot of field visits as well, because you can't just manage people from one central location. They have to see a real person and really interested in what they're doing.
So you served for 4 years,
Yeah,
full
all 4
time
years.
of President Trump's first term, and that is unusual in any presidency, let alone Mr. Trump's first term. How were you able to be successful and stay in that job for 4 years?
Well, several things. First of all, I knew him for a much longer time than most people in the government did, because I had been his adversary in the bankruptcy of his casino in Atlantic City, the Trump Taj Mahal. My clients were this mortgage bond holders that had never received a single interest payment. And we had quite a go-around for several months about it. And we finally got to a very fair deal. But the way we got there at the end was I called him one morning, because we're getting very close to what we thought we needed, and said, Donald, today is the day. We have to either make a deal or we're going to put the Taj into Chapter 11. He turned the offer down. So I went back to my office, put out a press release saying Trump Taj Mahal bondholders are going to have a very important press conference at the Marriott Marquis at 5 o'clock tonight. As soon as that hit the wire, he called me and said, Wilbur, what the hell is this? What is this all about? And I said, well, we told you we had to make a deal today. You turned the deal down. Unless you have something more to say, we're going to announce we're putting you in Chapter 11. So we went back and forth a little more, a few curlicues, and we made the deal. It was quite a trying day, as you might imagine. So as I got in the limo to be driven home, I was a little pooped, and the phone rings. It's my mother. This is your mother. And just that stern a tone of voice. I said, oh, hi, Mom, everything okay? No, everything is definitely not okay. What's wrong? Well, my friends and I were playing mahjong while we were watching that disgraceful press conference that you put on with Trump, and we'd feel you should not have made a deal with him after all the mean things he said about you. But, Mom, that's what I do. That's how I make my living. Well, if you'd only become a lawyer like I always wanted you to, you wouldn't have to hang around with people like that. She hung up on me. So a few weeks later, she forgave me for the Trump part, but she never did forgive me for not becoming a lawyer.
And that gave you the experience with the future president, so that when you were in
Yes.
his cabinet, you knew how to relate with him.
Well, not only that, then later he hired me to help him in some of the complicated things he had gotten into. So I had known him for, 25 years before the campaign. Then I campaigned for him, wrote quite a lot of editorials, debated the left-leaning organizations for him. So it wasn't a gigantic surprise that we'd end up together.
Fantastic. Well, we only have a limited amount of time on this interview, but I do want to talk to you about the topic that everybody's talking about, because you were very much involved in this issue during President Trump's first term, and that's tariffs.
Right.
So I read in your book that your first meeting in the Oval Office was about tariffs. You were involved in negotiations with China, with Europe, other places in the world about tariffs. Here we are, 100 days into President Trump's second term, and we've seen the president come out with all of these pronouncements about tariffs, the financial markets trying to absorb this, some announcements may be forthcoming on deals being reached. Tell us what's going on and what your view is.
Well, in the first administration, we were figuring out what tools does the administration have to act without requiring a congressional hearings and legislation, because Congress historically has dominated trade policy. And that's where we use Section 201, 301, Section 232, and IEPA. Now that he knows he's got the tools, he dispensed with a lot of the protocol, a lot of the formalities, like industry consultation that we used the first term, because he felt he had to get it all out there, because he was going to try to reform the world in a very quick time. That in turn meant that they would naturally make some mistakes. There'd be some directional changes that they would need as they interacted. And that's caused what in some people's mind is confusion. It's really just they're doing things very quickly. Markets don't like uncertainty. Markets can deal with good news, markets can deal with bad news. Uncertainty is hard to plan for, hard to deal with. So I think once he makes a couple of deals with some of the big trading partners, then people will see there's an end game. This isn't going to be just escalation forever. And probably India or Japan or Vietnam are my guesses as the three most likely to have at least one of them come through very quickly. And those are major players. They know they have to make a deal because their economies cannot afford being shut out of our market. But I just hope the administration doesn't become too overbearing, overtrade it, and get it to the point where the countries can't afford to make the concession. So that's going to be the ultimate determinant. I believe that with Scott Bessent in Treasury and Howard Lutnick in Commerce, I think they'll get their way through it, and I think we'll end up with a far improved trade balance in a much more stable economy.
You heard it here first. We're all hopeful for that. A real honor to have Secretary Ross with us, and thank you for supporting us here at Palm Beach Atlantic University.
Well, great. I'm delighted to be here. It's a spectacular library and a spectacular campus, and I'm very proud of this addition to Palm Beach.
Thank you so much, and we'll have more of these type of interviews where we're bringing great public policy discussions to Palm Beach Atlantic and the state of Florida. We look forward to seeing you next time.